I think I have like 7-8 slides. None of them, I promise, have I think more than 50 or 55 words on them. And I think the whole idea behind it is to kind of leave you with some thinking, some fodder for thought, right? As you kind of go about your day. So quick background, Abhishek, I'm in the US West Coast. Is actually pretty early for me. Even my dog was looking at me, saying, "What's wrong with you?" But anyway, I really wanted to, get a chance to speak to you about a concept that is very close to my heart. I've been in this industry for about 15 plus years, doing AI and stuff. I'll try not to use I think the most repeated word today, automation, RPA. Maybe talk a little bit about where is this all headed, right? Where do we see, or where do I see, kind of this is all headed. 4-point agenda. I'll just go over these concepts and then kind of, I think there's still a lot of disbelief in the industry on, is it real? Is it really doing anything? Is it all? I think somebody said vaporware, right? Is it that, or is there actual meat behind this, right? So let's start with maybe quick concepts. So autonomous, I think, I started with the dictionary definition, right? And I think, one thing key here is in the definition of autonomous, it says having the power to write or govern itself, right? I think that's really key. And it doesn't have to be just AI, right? Any kind of autonomy means that not only do you self-manage, but you self-govern as well. I think that's very key to this concept, right? And I think the bottom side is the Google Trends graph. I think, as expected, the mentions over news and Google is kind of going up in the last, I think, 10 years, 12 years or so. Autonomous. Okay, so this was interesting when I was doing my research for this talk, right? I wanted to know what else shows up when I search for autonomous, right? And there are surprising things. I had no idea there was an autonomous desk. There was an autonomous chair. There's actually a company called Autonomous which does office furniture. Don't ask me why they call them autonomous, right? But I think we have the obvious ones: the autonomous vehicles, autonomous driving. That's, I think, today when you talk about this, most people think about a autonomous vehicle as the first thing that comes to their mind, right? And I think the Teslas of the world are doing pretty good in terms of fully autonomous driving and level 5 driving, if you're following that industry. Some terms which you will hear everybody kind of interchange, me too as well, and I think this is happening because there's not a lot of, I would say, consensus. I think as an industry, we're still evolving. So for example, Gartner doesn't have a magic quadrant yet on this segment, right? Because again, the definitions are changing too much. People are adding, it's evolving, I would say, right? So, many people use self-healing, autonomous, synonymously, autonomous enterprises used interchangeably with operations. Just to be clear, autonomous enterprise does not mean that everything in the enterprise is, automated. So basically there are 0 employees and it's a machine running the whole show. It's not that. What they typically mean is operations, meaning, behind the scenes, right? Whatever happens behind the scenes. So the business part is still done by business people, but all of your IT, all of your operations, including, things like supply chain, is completely managed by a machine, or as far as possible, by a machine with very limited human intervention, right? So I think I want to delve a little bit into the operations part of it. And again, I think this is my slide with the most words. But traditionally, I think, we kind of know this intuitively, but just to highlight a couple of things that are, I think, in bold here. Traditional operations, what we know is, it always has 100% human dependency, right? And I think the biggest problem there is scale. So how do you scale an operation which is completely manual? And I think about this, right? If you think of large companies today, something like maybe Amazon, right? Do you know the level of automation they have typically in their warehouses? I think from what I remember, even their 5,000, 6,000 square feet warehouses typically have maybe less than 50 employees working, and it's completely automated. And I think there is no other way that it was possible for them to kind of offer 1-day, 2-day prime shipping, because if they depended on humans essentially to go through the millions of parcels that they essentially ship every day, this would not have been possible, right? So I think as you grow, these concepts kind of become not just necessary, but it's almost without these you can't scale. Next level is automated operations. I think as an industry, this is where we are today, right? And going back to my point of where are we headed? So I think most companies today are, experimenting with it. I think Gartner published a report, it said that unless you have some form of AI deployed, you are not going to, you are going to be actually left behind by the competition. It's not that you will be lagging or something. You will be left behind in the next 5 years, right? And that's a huge knock on the head for CIOs and CXOs all over the world, making them think, am I using AI? Am I leveraging AI? Can I do something else? What else can I do? Are there more use cases that I'm not looking at, right? And I think the third and the final phase in this path is what we call as fully autonomous operations. So I think you'll see the points there. So it's a system which can learn and adapt. I think that's important because earlier it used to be always instruction based. So if X then Y, if Z then something else. That's how we define instructions, right? But with autonomous, that need to play out every different scenario is kind of taken away, right? And the machine starts learning. So you kind of tell it to maybe handle 50%, and then it just figures out the rest, right? It is pretty sophisticated in its decision-making algorithm. So again, not a simple algorithm, step-by-step based decision-making approach. It can mimic thinking. It's a closed-loop system. That's an interesting term, right? This is something you might hear, right? But what it means is that let's talk about a typical service desk, right? You have an alert, comes in, typically goes and creates a ticket. Somebody looks at it, says it's not mine, pushes it over to the next person's bucket. He realizes it's his, resolves it, right? And goes back into your ServiceNow or whatever service desk tool that you use and closes the ticket, right? Closed loop automation essentially means that this entire flow, from the moment the alert is generated all the way till the ticket is actually closed in your service desk, right? All of this is handled by one machine, right? And this could involve this machine talking to 50 other servers, gathering logs, doing some diagnostic. But again, the whole genesis or the whole whatever path of alert is, automated. And I think what's key here is because this is machine talking to machine, this can be done at machine speed, right? So, I don't know what your average response time per ticket is, but typically what I've seen is it takes about 2 to 3 days on average to close a ticket, right? This entire flow. And I mean, in today's world, it's irrelevant because issues happen in a moment's time and sometimes even disappear. They won't ever happen again. The same set of scenarios will never happen again, right? If it takes you 2 days to resolve a ticket or even diagnose a ticket, or even a day, for example, to diagnose a ticket, you have already lost it. Machines operating or talking with machines can do this in milliseconds, right? So as the issue is happening, the diagnosis picks up, right? It's actually trying to diagnose as the issue is happening, which gives a lot more evidence. It can actually catch what's going on behind the scenes. Let's move on. The definition of autonomous enterprise, again, this is emerging, as I said, right? There's no universal definition yet. But I think these are some terms that you will see whenever somebody comes up with the official definition. Context awareness, I think that's important because for any machine, to go and operate something, it has to be aware of what exactly it's doing, what are the tools it is working with. It needs to generate insights. So basically, it needs a lot of data. It will do machine learning algorithms on it, data mining to kind of generate insights, and then essentially use those insights to go and resolve issues. Right? That's the end goal. Why? I think this was one of the important points, and there's some bit of disbelief. So I want to start with kind of this whole line in red, right? And I think I mentioned this, with the Amazon example, right? But I mean, this is true in organizations of any size today. Even small organizations today don't have huge teams or huge armies of IT, right? Everybody is kind of trying to reduce their budget, and the way I think organizations are scaling today, right? I think I have a metric here, right? As per some metric, some news article I found out, every day we are generating 10 to the power 18 bytes of data. That's 2.5 quintillion, right? 18 zeros behind it, right? And I was not able to find how many alerts and tickets and all are generated in a day, but I think some estimate says that not even large, I think medium to large organizations generate millions of alerts in a day. in a day, single day, right? So imagine how many people would you need if somebody was looking at maybe 20, 30 alerts in an hour, right? How many people would you need to look at millions of alerts just to kind of observe, figure out what the noise is, or rather figure out what the signal is in the noise, right? Is that possible with humans is, the question here. And again, I think I talked about this, right? So the manual approach is slow. It is kind of a personal touch approach, but it cannot scale, right? And the need for instant fixes here, right? Things going out. We all know about Facebook going down last week, right? So this human tacit knowledge, which is typically in people's heads, right? Your service desk and service teams, right? We want to capture this and essentially codify it, right? Essentially make sure a machine understands it. So, we can go ahead and automate it. Quickly, 3 basic principles. Again, this is different on the product you're looking at, right? We do it differently. There's some other products in the industry which do it a little bit differently. But I think 3 main concepts that you will see. One is understanding context. This is what I think some people call as learning or blueprinting. Essentially, this is mapping out the organization, right? The second would be deriving insights. So this is again typical data mining, right? Looking at logs of the last 5 years, if that is available, and understanding what are the patterns. Do things happen differently on a Monday? Do things happen on the 1st of the month or 31st of the month, for example, right? And what can I use those metrics and can I use those metrics in my decision making for the same thing next Monday or the next 1st of the month? And then the final step is the automation part. Here again, this definition, if this is evolving as well. So traditionally we had this reactive and proactive, and I was reading another article that day. I think they had these 4 steps, and I thought that was interesting. So they said we have moved on from proactive, essentially, looking at past data and trying to be ready with it. Now we are in a stage which is called prescriptive, right? And this is essentially beyond predictive. So we have proactive, predictive, prescriptive. Prescriptive again is the final frontier where machine will look at the data, predict what is going to happen, and essentially resolve it before it happens. And so no lights out, no downtime. I think this is probably my last slide. Yeah. So again, going back to how much of it is real, right? I think machines, softwares, platforms today are getting very good at some of these stages, right? We are not all the way there to fully self-driving yet, but I think anomaly detection, correlation, I've seen benchmarks and case studies which are approaching 85, 90%, right? That means 90% of the million alerts that show up in the service desk today are automated, meaning a system looks at it, decides if it is worth my time to look at, or rather worth a human's time to look at, right? And it will automatically suppress everything else. That's the whole noise elimination. Auto triaging is kind of basic diagnostic. So when you look at a ticket, typically an admin does the same 5 steps. He will log into the server, get the logs, log into, let's say, a database, look at something, look at the network performance. Why can't this be automated? And that essentially forms part of the triaging, right? Whenever there's an incident, can I quickly look at what's going on? Can I collect all the logs and present it as an evidence to human, the person who is looking at it? Real-time incident responses, this is what I think we mean by self-healing, right? But even for basic issues, right? Even let's say if it's a password reset or a server has to be restarted, how real-time can we get? And again, industry benchmarks here, the best I've seen, the companies who are kind of leading this effort, I've seen there are companies approaching 45, 50%. That means that 50% of their tickets, at least their alerts and machine-generated tickets, are automated without any human involvement. And again, I'm talking about the closed loop, right? So the moment it is generated till the moment it is resolved, comments are added into the tickets, evidence is attached, and it is closed and gone for good. So even before it, appears in somebody's dashboard, which might take a few seconds, machine has the capability to actually go and resolve it. It will be available for you if you want to, if you want to audit this someday. But I think that's where we are. Benchmarks at a technology level. What I mean by that is specific technologies. If you want to take like an Oracle database or Windows machine or a Linux server, the benchmarks of automation today are approaching 80%. What that means is 80% of all the activities that are possible remotely on a Linux server or an Oracle database have been codified. They are available now as a library, as an API, and anybody can use that to automate, again, 80% of all activities on this, right? So automation still has to go to that level, but this is where we are approaching, at least for the most commonly used technologies, right? And I think the last point, and I think this is interesting, is how people are using it, right? And I wanted to maybe spend a minute on this. I think depending on your job profile, right? So CXOs, if you look at CXOs, they're all looking at it from their own lenses. So the CFO looks at it and thinks that, okay, can I use it to eliminate, right, my service techs, for example, or cut down my manpower costs, right? Or can I repurpose them somewhere else to other IT projects and kind of reduce my IT headcount, right? The CIOs are looking at it thinking, oh, can I reduce the downtime? Can I not have the next outage, or can I reduce the outage time? The business people, the CEO is looking at, how can I improve my customer experience for that matter, right? And whether you're a bank, whether you're a store, I mean, there are always issues, right? How can you use technology, again, technology talking to technology, to resolve, triage some of these issues quickly? I think that's all I had. I think, yeah, that's all I had. I think one thought that I probably want to leave you with is this concept is, still emerging, right? And I would encourage you to think about this, talk about this, discuss about it, because AI is here. It's not going anywhere. And whether you need to reskill people in your organization, you need to reskill yourself. Think about your next move, right? AI is here. Autonomy is on its way, right? And I think it's kind of mimicking what we are doing with the cars. So many people are now getting comfortable driving fully self-driven car, right? And I think over time, maybe in a couple of years, this will just go up. Yeah, I think that's all I had.
Brilliant. Thanks. That's great. Thank you, Abhishek. That's fantastic. I mean, I don't think we've got any questions that have come through directly. I'm sure we'll have time for one if somebody wants to ask one now. I've certainly got a question about, we had another fantastic event recently with knowledge management, and we talked about tacit knowledge and how difficult it is to control tacit knowledge. So you mentioned codifying tacit knowledge. Now, I don't know if you've got any experience of that or any decent practice or any thoughts on it. How do you go about capturing tacit knowledge in an organization and codifying that? How do you start with that? Where do you, I don't know, have you any thoughts of that or maybe experienced that?
Right. No, that's an excellent question. I think, I mean, it has to be approached on multiple levels. One is tacit knowledge at a technology level. So, talking, about the technology itself. So you pick Windows, you pick Linux, pick, Oracle, any other database. Who are the experts in that area, right? And I think there are many companies that are doing this, right? So they're looking at these technologies, looking at their experts in those areas, and asking them to just literally sit down and say, can you just define what are the possible operations here? And, what does high memory, low CPU mean, for example, or, too many page buffers mean for this technology? So they're actually codifying that. Many companies have done that. The other side of the coin, right, which is the business knowledge, which is what happens in your organization, which is something that typically only the organization will know. Going back to my example, what happens on Monday versus Sundays or on the 15th of the month, right? That is something that is kind of tacit in the people in the in the organization, and essentially it's them who will have to sit down and write it as business logic. It has to be captured somewhere before it can go into, before you can teach it to a machine. I mean, yeah, I don't think there are any shortcuts to that, but it's kind of do it once and then it can be scaled up pretty quickly.
Really interesting, and synergies everywhere on that knowledge thing, the synergies between the last event and this one. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Abhishek. Sorry it was late again. I appreciate you hanging on. So thank you for that, and hopefully we get a chance to do this again sometime. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, David. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, now then, let me just change my slide. There we are, and show my screen. Great. Okay, so that pretty much is it really for today. One or two things before we close.